floor to Mr. Arne Eik from Equinor. Equinor is a leading company to floating wind offshore globally, and I will say that especially the recent final investment decision of the Tampem High Wind project was a milestone, have been a milestone in the global market of floating offshore. So we are very happy and we're very proud having Mr. Arne here because he represents one of the pioneers of the sector who has a leading and extensive experience in a lot of different regulatory frameworks. Arne, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Panagiotis, and thank you for organizing this brilliant event. And also, I would like to say thank you for putting up a proposal for a regulatory framework, which we think looks quite good. And also, I must say I'm quite impressed by the speed of the Greek government when it comes to rolling out floating offshore wind. So these are exciting times. So I'm working with business development in floating offshore wind. So we're looking into Greece and other countries to see if there are any opportunities for us as one of the leading offshore wind developers in the world. And as you mentioned, Panagiotis, we are in particular focusing on taking a world leadership within floating offshore wind. So today I share a few thoughts on a floating offshore wind roadmap which we have developed, and secondly, I'd like to share also our thoughts around what we think would be needed for Greece to succeed with floating offshore wind. Okay. I mentioned we are put up a floating wind roadmap, and this is both the way we see it. At least it's a wind roadmap, floating wind roadmap for the floating industry, but also it's a roadmap where we see what we are working on and what we are striving for. We have divided this roadmap into 3 phases: a technology development phase, a cost reduction phase, and then we finally reach full commercialization and industrialization of floating offshore wind around 2030. That's what we're all working for. That's what we work for as a developer, and that's also why we're collaborating with other developers and suppliers to get to that point. This is an industry game. It's not an Equinor game by any means. Collaboration is so important if we're gonna succeed with floating as we have done with bottom fixed offshore wind. We had our first project back already in 2009, the demo project in Norway, and as already mentioned, Hywind Scotland was up and running from 2017, 30 megawatt. And now we are very keen to get the Hywind Tampen project, which has already been mentioned here a couple of times. It's an 88 megawatt, which is going to supply oil and gas installation in the North Sea. This is then maybe going to be the largest project in the world in 2022. That being said, we hope we are wrong, because as already mentioned, getting more projects from various developers is so important to get this industry up and running. So if anyone's past 100 megawatt by 2022, we will of course be very happy for that. Cost reduction is a key word here, and I'd like to share a few numbers for you. When we went from Hywind demo to Hywind Scotland, we obviously managed to reduce the costs a lot, 70–80%. But we also see now that we are on line to reduce the costs, the levelized cost of energy from Hywind Scotland to Hywind Tampen with as much as 40%. We also see now when we're now planning the next floating wind project at the size of 200 to 500 megawatt, we are likely to be able to reduce that with another 40% compared to Hywind Tampen. And when we're talking about big wind farms, as we see in offshore, in bottom fixed offshore wind, we do think it is realistic to get to this 40 to 60 euro per megawatt for wind farm installed around 2030. That's what we're all working for, and that's what we all need to succeed with. Just like to mention a few of the cost reduction drivers, and I think it's already been mentioned here that it's important to have developers that have experience with offshore wind farms. And we do see that when we go from one project to the next project, we learn a lot. So project experience, ability to run all these big offshore wind projects, that is crucial. But obviously, you also see that the industry as such is moving. Larger project is number one if you want to get down in costs. If you are going to do pilot, it will be much more expensive than if you do large project. And that is also a message we have always given, and that's also a message we have been given to Greek stakeholders. So we for our next project, we are considering project of at least 200 megawatt. Also very important, and that this also comes with scale and more project, obviously, and that is to get a competitive supply chain. We do see it in bottom fixed, and we also see it coming now in floating offshore wind. Being able to standardize and fabricate these floating structure in an efficient and cost-effective way, it's key to succeed. And obviously, it's also about innovation. It's about coming up with smarter solutions. It's coming up with how could you use digitalization in order to run these wind farms. How could you make sure you have a floater which is as efficient and light as possible? Many things also on the innovation side. So if I were to give a few, should we call it advices to the Greek government and other Greek players within floating offshore wind, I would put up a few things here. I think we're mainly talking about three keywords that would be important to succeed and would be important to attract investors and developers like ourselves. Number one is visibility. Number two is learning from other countries and learning from other sectors. And number three, allow for competition. And I explore a little bit around those three things. With visibility, I mean that we as a developer, we need to go, when we go into a new market or new countries, we go and say, okay, is it likely that this will be a large country in terms of several projects? Or do we think that this is a project where they maybe have a pilot and then they wait and see what happens next? For us, it's important that the country set a clear ambition and a clear target for floating offshore wind. And we would recommend that you set that for 2030, but that we also set it beyond that. So clear ambition and target is extremely important for visibility. We also think that that it is important to get started now, in the sense that opening a couple of areas for offshore wind and start with those, run some auctions there. Maybe it's a better approach than opening the whole Greece in the beginning. So from that point of view, we think that the way the Hellenic Wind Energy Associations has put that in their paper makes quite a bit sense. Also in this paper, it's very much focusing on building on the experiences from other countries. Offshore wind has been around for quite a while. There is a lot to learn of good things and bad things. And I know that the Greek government is doing that. They are looking into exploring other countries and what they have learned from their offshore wind work. So put up an institutional framework based on that, And as Giles said, we don't have a view on whether it has to be a new Greek model or a UK model or a Dutch model, but learn and look at what others has done. And also very important when it comes to learning is think about coexistence with fisheries, with tourisms, with military and other interests from the beginning. And I know that this is also a key topic when the government is looking into how to do this in Greece. If we have an early dialogue, I think it would be much easier and much more efficient than if we just run away and hope for the best afterwards. Coexistence, or happy coexistence, as Giles put it, is absolutely key. As mentioned, we are looking for competition. We think that having transparency and a transparent and competitive process is key. We are happy to learn that Greece is considering auctions, building on the successful auctions you have had within solar and onshore. But also, as Giles mentioned, it's important to have visibility here in terms of a clear auction timetable. What is going to happen when? When is the first auction going to take place? And when is the second auction going to place? And so on. This will empower developers and the supply chain. And I think there's already been mentioned several times the importance of grid capacity. We don't have a firm view on whether it has to be centralized or decentralized, or whether private investors should be involved in that. I think it makes quite a bit of sense the way the Greek TSO is thinking around this. But the key thing for us as a developer is, of course, that we have sufficient grid capacity and that we have the grid capacity ready in time. So I think that was at least a few reflections from my side on how Greece should think about floating offshore wind. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Arne. Thank you very much. I have noted 4 words, and with your permission, I will always use them. Visibility, learning, transparency, coexistence. So this will be my motto from now. I will now give the floor